Fear No Evil. Chapter 5. When Izuku woke up, he lay on yet another altar. Smoke rising off the incense burners obscured the air. Surely they weren't going to make him go through that damn hugging ritual again. His broken arm couldn't take it. He clenched his teeth. Flecked Turn stood at the foot of the altar. A stranger with neon purple hair bent over Izuku. The newcomer's eyes were wide and nervous. He said, "I apologize for what I'm about to do, Chosen One." That sounded very ominous. Unfortunately, Izuku had been tied down. He tested the cuff on his good arm, but it was too tight to budge. His broken right arm was untied, but felt agonizingly heavy. Sparks of pain went through his body when he attempted movement. The stranger placed his hands on Izuku's cast. A warm energy ran through him. The pain from the break stopped. Mumbling frantic apologies, the man stepped away. "Cease tainting the Messiah's ears with your words," Flecked ordered his follower curtly. Then he started cutting away Izuku's cast to reveal healed flesh. "Amazing," Izuku muttered. "Very few healing quirks work so quickly." Flecked held up Izuku's arm and examined it. "There's still a bruise, but it's mostly healed." He caressed Izuku's healed right hand. "I apologize for exposing you to such vile corruption, but we need you in good health for your medical exam. The samples we're collecting are very important." After everything this cult had put him through, they were apologizing for healing him. It was more horrible than funny. Izuku didn't like the implication that he'd been healed only for the sake of more unwanted medical procedures. "What kind of samples are you taking from me?" he demanded. "Oh no, that's not what we're doing right now. Not when you're still in such a tragic condition." Flecked sounded scandalized at the thought. "Your poor arm has been touched by a vile disease. First, we need to purify you." He reached for the table of tools behind him. Toshinori had discovered the 10th circle of hell, being stuck on an overnight airplane flight with All for One. His eyes darting around the passengers, All for One muttered under his breath. "A sensitive taste quirk, a double-jointed quirk, a hair growth quirk. Oh my, that last one is good." Toshinori growled. "No stealing quirks. We have rules, remember?" Between them, Aizawa snored. He'd wrapped 3 airplane blankets around his body. The teacher had insisted on taking the middle seat in hopes of preventing conflict. This small buffer did not seem to be holding. All for One pouted. "I was just looking. Can't I look? Heroes are so obnoxiously self-righteous, accusing people without any proof. Ooh." His neck swiveled around as the flight attendant pushed a cart past. He reached for her. Lunging over Aizawa's seat, Toshinori grabbed All for One's hand. "Was that just looking?" "Ew, don't touch me." All for One shook him off. "She has a quirk that prevents motion sickness, perfect for her line of work. I was just going to take it for the duration of this trip, then give it back." "You give something back?" Toshinori snorted. He reminded himself that if he fought All for One on a moving airplane 30,000 feet in the air, they'd probably both die. Although it might be worth... No, he had to think of the other innocent passengers and saving young Midoriya. "That's rich coming from a one-for-all holder. As my brother's only surviving relative, I'm rightfully entitled to his quirk, which you stole." All for One shifted and groaned. "I really do feel sick. If you don't let me have the quirk, I might throw up on you." Toshinori said icily, "Suck it up. Just being in your presence makes me sick." "It's a shame Kurogiri's warp quirk won't reach all the way to Europe. If only I had a quirk that would speed up this trip." "Don't even try it. You'd probably rip the plane to shreds." All for One's voice turned sickly sweet. "I did steal one quirk that will protect me in the event of a plane crash many years ago. It's called Float." A snarl distorting his face, Toshinori lunged. Aizawa yanked off his sleeping mask and activated Erasure. "Will you both let me sleep in peace? We need rest for the rescue mission." "Sorry," Toshinori mumbled. All for One pouted. "I didn't do anything at all. That brute simply attacked me unprovoked." Aizawa glared at the villain. I've never met anyone who loves the sound of his own voice as much as you, except maybe Present Mike. At least he has great hair. Clutching at his chest as if wounded, All for One cried, Such treachery! I thought the two of us had something special. Aizawa said, That was before I got stuck on an airplane with you. Now I hate you. Toshinori nodded. He has that effect on people. You should listen to him monologue on the battlefield. Or rather, you shouldn't. It's a lot of words to say, I became a villain because I wasn't hugged enough as a child. No wonder dealing with him reminds me of my students. He clearly never grew up. Aizawa nodded. I haven't seen such intense daddy issues since Enji Todoroki brought his youngest son for a school tour. You're making that up, All for One said, but in a slightly defensive tone. I've never even mentioned my parents during our short acquaintance. Aizawa snorted. Oh, it doesn't have to be anything as obvious as that, it's just... He waved his hands. Everything about you. Toshinori laughed. It practically radiates off you. Wah, wah, I want to destroy society because my parents never loved me. I knew you were that type from the moment I laid eyes on you. In fact, Toshinori was just making this up, but he could tell Aizawa had found a sore spot, and after the jab about Nana's death, he had no compunctions about milking it for all it was worth. All for One's eye twitched. You're completely wrong. I became a villain for fun and profit. I'm not one of those pathetic saps with a tragic backstory. Toshinori said, Really? Then say it right now. My father was a good dad. My mother loved me. All for One growled, I have nothing to prove to you. Aizawa leaned over and whispered, Mommy and daddy issues. Toshinori laughed. I'm pretty sure he has brother issues too. Since we apparently have no rule against digging up the past, I could tell you a fun story about that. All for One's arms started swelling up. You're even throwing a temper tantrum, Aizawa said, his eyes glowing. All for One's arm shrank. I feel sorry for your son. It looks like you inherited a tendency to violence from your own father. All for One snarled, I'm nothing like that man. I'd never lay a finger on my son. He stopped and paled as Aizawa and Toshinori turned identical smug expressions on him. He admitted it, Toshinori said. Aizawa shook his head slowly. Tragic. Toshinori said, If only he'd at least had a sibling to love him. Oh, wait. All for One glared. You're both dead as soon as I find my son. As if you weren't already plotting to kill me to my face. Aizawa yanked his sleeping mask back over his eyes. You scare me less than grading my students' final exams. Wake me up when we land. Izuku didn't very much like the sound of this so-called purification. When Flecht reached for a scalpel, Izuku stiffened, bracing himself for pain. He could tolerate pain. At school, he'd been beaten and kicked and burned. He had to be careful not to accidentally release his quirk in response. Not only his own life, but also Botan's punishment hung in balance. He would take this pain as he'd taken so many others in the past. So Izuku was caught completely off guard when Flecht slashed the arm of the purple-haired healer. Stop! Izuku screamed, straining against his cuffs. In that moment, his vow not to use his quirk flew from his head. But it made no difference. He didn't know how to activate One for All, didn't even know what he'd done the first time. The cuffs dug into his limbs, leaving red marks. He stretched out with his right arm, now healed from the break, but he couldn't reach far enough to touch Flecht. The healer moaned in pain, but kept holding his arm out. Blood dripped into a cup held by Flecht. With chilling calm, Flecht said, He has used his disease on a chosen one and must be punished for it. He understands. I understand, the healer whimpered, pressing his fingers into his arm to force out more blood. He healed my arm! Why the hell would that deserve a punishment? Izuku screamed. If you consider that to be a sin, then why did you order him to use his quirk on me to begin with? My arm would have eventually healed on its own. It was a dire choice, Flecht said. He set the cup down and grabbed Izuku's free arm. We need you healthy in order for you to save us. Izuku laughed, a sound torn between hardness and hysteria. I can't save anyone, including myself. Now I must purify you. Flecht inclined his head at the purple-haired man. "Leave us." The man departed without another word, holding his arm to his chest to stop the blood from hitting the floor. Izuku said, "Please tell me he's going to see a doctor. If you won't let him heal himself, then at least give him antibiotics. What if he gets an infection?" "You have such a kind spirit, as expected of the purest of pure." Flecht stroked Izuku's hair. If he moved his hand just a little lower, then Izuku would be able to bite him, and then they'd see who had a kind spirit. When Flecht let him go and turned to pick up the cup of blood, Izuku saw his chance. He punched Flecht's back with all his strength from months training on the beach. Pain slammed into Izuku, sending him falling backward onto the altar. His head smacked the stone. Tears blurred his eyes. "Oh no! Why did you do that?" Flecht grabbed Izuku's free arm and chained it down. "I'm sorry. I activated my curse by habit. You mustn't do that again." He spoke as if scolding a child. Though his ears still rang from the force of the blow, Izuku started mumbling out of habit. "You have some sort of reflecting quirk. It bounces back any force directed at you." Flecht sighed. "It's a dreadful curse, because I can't stop my sinful body from rejecting anything I come into contact with. Anyone who touches me suffers harm. My own parents never once held me. I never had any friends. The world rejected me, so I rejected the world. When I discovered Humarise, it felt as if I'd been struck by a lightning bolt of inspiration. So many people suffer and hate themselves because of their powers. As humanity's prophet and savior, I will rid the world of this vile disease." He stroked Izuku's cheek. "And you will become my divine instrument." Izuku twitched, unable to move away. He struggled for the correct words to reason with someone insane. But you clearly can turn off your quirk, because you're touching me right now. By the way, I would like it if you'd stop doing that. Not that I suppose you care." Flecht beamed. He kissed Izuku's forehead. "Only the chosen ones, the purest of pure, can touch me. Your innocence protects you from my sin. Because of my power, I can always tell a true chosen one from someone who had their taint removed by the devil all for one. And you have the holiest presence of anyone I've laid hands on." This was an absolute load of horse shit, because Izuku had a quirk and a broken arm to prove it. Based on his own extensive research, a quirk that didn't work on quirkless people sounded very scientifically unlikely. And Flecht's obsession with Izuku's so-called purity proved that he had no real ability to detect quirks. It must be psychological. Izuku remembered that unpleasant dinner at the Japanese compound when he'd gotten Haruto's hair to stop glowing by pretending to banish the boy's quirk. Flecht believed he could only touch quirkless people, therefore it became true. Flecht had reflected Izuku's punch, then switched back to touching Izuku, thus proving that he could turn his quirk on and off at will. He'd simply convinced himself that he couldn't. Everyone in this cult needed a psychiatrist. Izuku would almost feel sorry for Flecht in his lonely isolation, except the cult leader had clearly never even tried to learn to control his ability. This man was the author of his own misery. He went around pushing everyone away, literally, hurting others with his out-of-control power, and then acting like the victim. It was symbolic of everything wrong with this whole mad cult. Izuku did not truly expect to be able to get through to a fanatic who hated his power so much. But he had to try. Quirks become easier to control with repeated use. Because you hate and reject your power, you've never figured out how to turn it off. If you let me, I'd help you figure out how to stop reflecting everything involuntarily. He had no intention of revealing how he knew for certain that Flecht could touch people with quirks, because he didn't want to be brutally murdered. Flecht laughed. "What nonsense. Does a disease improve if you allow it to spread further throughout your body?" "It's not a disease. It's an extremely useful power for self-defense. If you mastered it, then maybe you could use your power to help other people who had trouble controlling their quirks. You'd be the only one who could go near them. You have one of the coolest abilities I've ever seen." "Hush." Flecht followed up this patronizing command by gagging Izuku's mouth. "It is a cool ability," Izuku thought defiantly. "Just completely wasted on a jerk." Flecht picked up the knife. You still need to be purified. Izuku tried not to flinch as the blade raised, but he couldn't help shaking a little. The purification ritual might demand his blood next. Flecht could probably find a way to justify it. Humming under his breath, Flecht waved the knife in circles over Izuku's face. In the silent room, the slice of the blade through the air sounded loud. Izuku was close enough to see the flecks of blood on the steel. One dripped down and landed on his nostril. He squirmed, but could not stop himself from inhaling it. Not when he currently couldn't breathe through his mouth. A sickening coppery stench tickled his nose. It mingled with the reeking incense. He coughed into the gag. Flecht combed fingers through his hair. Preparation for a haircut? Izuku could tolerate losing his hair. Unlike an injury, that wouldn't impede his escape. He tried to pretend he was only concerned about escaping, not pain. He did not entirely fool himself. His heart hammered inside his trapped body, his eyes tracked the blade. But instead, Flecht turned away, placing the knife on a cloth on the workbench. Oh, then the hair padding had been an attempt at comfort. It definitely hadn't worked. Flecht dipped a brush into the cup of blood. Then he painted a swirl on Izuku's chained hand. Izuku screamed into his gag, mostly out of shock. He couldn't even squirm. He could do nothing but curse internally as Flecht painted the purple-haired man's blood on his arm, then in a spiral on his white robe directly over his heart, then the other arm. It felt sticky and hideous. If the symbols had any meaning, then Izuku didn't recognize them. More likely he simply made them up. These people are insane enough to do something like that. I want to vomit. As the patterns next moved to his legs, Izuku existed in a state of tension, concerned that at any minute Flecht might start cutting him up if he ran out of blood for his bizarre ritual. But after Flecht finished with one last drop of blood on Izuku's forehead, he said, "There, all pure again." Completely bonkers, Izuku thought. Flecht said, "I'll even let you off without a punishment for trying to escape, since it's the first time and you're already going through a purification ritual. Just stay like that for 1 hour, then we'll wash you off. Doesn't that sound nice?" With the gag in place, Izuku could only convey his fury with his eyes. He glared with all his might, thinking, "You're sick." An oddly melancholy look flashed across Flecht's face. The first few months are always rough. You'll come to understand, just like the others. Others. Izuku's mind fixated on that word. It filled him with rage that the cult had gotten away with imprisoning and hurting people for so long, and fear that someday he'd end up broken as they planned. Over the next hour, he stewed in his chains, desperate to scratch the sticky sensation of blood off his body, but unable to move. Every time he inhaled, the blood in his nostril sank deeper. He started to taste it in the back of his throat. This miserable experience had at least confirmed one thing. Botan had been right about the cult murdering him if they ever found out he had a quirk. Izuku had to keep one for all hidden, to save it for when it would count the most. Whether he succeeded or failed, his next attempt to escape would likely be his last one. Izuku felt motion, hands under his armpits. Someone grunted. He wouldn't have believed it possible for him to fall asleep while covered in someone else's blood, but it had happened. He suspected the incense might contain drugs. That would explain his splitting headache. Izuku's hands were freed. Someone dragged him into a new room. He jerked away and turned around. Barros stared at him with red-rimmed eyes. She said, "I was taking you to the bathroom to wash off." This room looked almost identical to the last cell where he'd been imprisoned. Pure white walls, a bed, and a door leading to the bathroom. Izuku said, "I can wash myself. Don't touch me." He ran into the bathroom. There was no lock, but by some miracle, Barros didn't follow him. He turned on the bath faucet. Without even waiting for the water to heat up, he stripped off the blood-stained robe and scrubbed every last bit of blood off his skin. He kept on scrubbing until his skin was red and raw, but he still didn't feel clean. Then he huddled in the chilly water with his arms wrapped around his shoulders. From outside, Barros called, It's been a while. I'm getting worried about you. Do you need any help? No, Izuku cried. He sprang out of the bath and grabbed a towel to wrap around himself. Barros cracked open the door just wide enough to shove a fresh white robe through. She had a bandage on her arm. Izuku realized that must be from where he'd bitten her. Sorry, he said by reflex, even though he wasn't actually sorry about fighting back during his kidnapping. What? Oh, do you mean the injury? Don't let it trouble you, Messiah. It's an honor. I hope that it will scar so that I may carry a mark of you on my skin. Izuku couldn't think of anything else to say. He dried himself off as quickly as possible. When Izuku emerged from the bathroom, he saw tears trickling down Barros' cheeks. Unable to help himself, he asked, Is something wrong? Barros sniffled and scrubbed at her face. The compound back in Japan was attacked. They took my mother. Worse, the abomination All Might took her. A wave of euphoric relief washed over Izuku. He was so happy that Botan and everyone imprisoned in the compound had been saved. He'd been desperately afraid that if anyone found out about his quirk, then Botan would be punished for covering it up. This took a huge weight off his mind. Of course, Izuku wished he'd been rescued too. It was frustrating to think that this must have happened right after they'd moved him. If only he'd been able to hold out and hide a little longer. He hated his own uselessness. But at least this showed that All Might was making progress toward finding him. Izuku was not insensitive enough to express his delight to Barros, nor did he have it in him to pretend to be upset. So instead he said, All Might would never hurt your mom. I don't know what they've told you about him, but heroes don't go around attacking old ladies. But what if being in his sinful presence causes her to develop a quirk? Izuku couldn't exactly say it was impossible given his own experience, but he was pretty sure All Might only had the one transferable quirk. Barros' shoulders heaved. I know, it doesn't sound likely, but I hate to think of all the purification rituals she'll have to go through after she returns. Izuku did not think the authorities would let Humarise take back their former captives so easily, but he knew that wouldn't comfort Barros. He stuttered, trying to think of something to say. Another tear trickled down Barros' cheek. Can I have a hug? Izuku hesitated. A deeply ingrained kindness warred with his anger at the cult and weariness of being hugged. At least she'd asked. Okay. He held out his arms. As he hugged Barros, Izuku considered this new information. All Might was looking for him, but now he'd been moved to a foreign country, he'd been much harder to find. He couldn't just wait around for rescue. He needed to get All Might a signal. Izuku was not even given a moment to rest and recover before Fleck's turn arrived to take him to his new sacred purpose in life, being a lab rat. The lights of the laboratory felt blinding after the shadowy ceremony room. Izuku blinked and rubbed his eyes. He'd changed into the medical gown on his own rather than be forced. The flimsy paper left him feeling vulnerable and powerless, especially with Fleck's turn watching intently. A European man with brown hair and glasses introduced himself as Eddie Soul. Eddie took his weight, height, blood pressure, and temperature. Then he brought over a needle. Not meeting Izuku's eyes, he whispered, We need more blood samples. Standing in the corner, Fleck cleared his throat. I hate to cause the Messiah any pain. Can you numb him first? No, I'm fine with needles, I love them, Izuku babbled. The threat of being paralyzed before the involuntary medical procedures only terrified him even more. Eddie said, I can bring a numbing cream, but any drugs would interfere with samples. Very well. Be as gentle as possible, Fleck ordered. Eddie prepped Izuku's arm, then started to lower the needle attached to the blood bag. His hands shook badly. He stopped. I'm sorry. He lowered the needle again, only to veer off at the last minute. Lifting his glasses, he wiped tears from his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered again. Having the needle keep approaching his skin and then stop at the last minute was murder on Izuku's nerves. He growled, If you're so sorry, then why are you doing this? Humarise kidnapped me, Eddie whispered. They threatened to kill my children if I didn't obey them. Flecht made a warning sound in the back of his throat. There's no need for the Messiah to know such things. Oh, they do that a lot, don't they? Izuku swallowed. It's okay, I don't blame you. He held out his arm. Let's get this over with. It took Eddie 2 tries to find a vein. Izuku clamped his lips shut so as to not make a sound of pain. Leaning close to his ear, Eddie whispered, I doubt I can do what they want of me. I can't magically give someone else your genes. At least they understand genetics poorly enough that I can stall. He drew back while Izuku kept a studiously straight face. Afterward, Izuku was forced to eat a huge iron-rich dinner and drink a lot of water with Flecht looming over him solicitously. Izuku felt ill about this twisted genetic engineering project to produce quirkless children. He hoped Eddie was right. He wondered how many more tests he'd have to go through and what the cult might do to him if his DNA didn't provide the salvation they sought. I regret that we can't let you stay with the other holy children, since we need to keep you close for the experiments. It must be lonely for you. I've worked out a schedule so myself and my most trusted people will keep you company as frequently as possible. Izuku had no words, only sarcasm. Although he stayed up late examining his cell, he found no way out. The inside of his door didn't even have a knob, much less a lock to pick. He finally collapsed from exhaustion. The next morning involved several rounds of scanning. Izuku lay in a tube until he felt ready to attempt murder just for a break from the boredom. After several hours, Flecht received a message on his phone. He glanced down, then left. Oh, thank God, Eddie said. I wasn't sure how much longer I could fake running scans. He didn't even notice the machine was turned off. I arranged a leak in the trigger laboratory downstairs. They must have finally found it. While he's gone, I'm getting you out of here. He handed Izuku a cultist robe. Izuku didn't know this man. This could be a test or a trap. But he didn't see how his situation could get much worse. Thank you. He ducked behind a curtain and changed out of the medical gown. Why are you helping me? I can't experiment on a child. I just can't. Eddie gnawed on his lip. You're even younger than my roadie. Izuku started to believe this was genuine. Are you coming with me? Yes, you'll need me to guide you. Eddie flashed a strained smile. If we get separated, then I need you to go straight to the police and arrange protection for my children. Their names are Rodi, Roro, and Lala Soul. The trembling in his hands betrayed his fear. Izuku frowned. I don't want to endanger your children. We can wait and think up an escape plan where no one will know that you're involved. I can be patient. Unfortunately, my plan relies on a truck of supplies that's leaving today, Eddie said. And this is more urgent than you know. Humarise has been building bombs containing trigger. They plan to place them in major cities around the world. If they succeed, it will be a genocide. He placed the flash drive into Izuku's hand. I've copied everything I know into this. I have a copy too. Even if only one of us makes it out, this information must reach the authorities. Izuku giggled hysterically. It was a completely inappropriate reaction, but he couldn't help himself. Of course the batshit crazy cult was planning a genocide. Of course! This was his life now. I'm sorry, that just slipped out. It all seems so insane. Eddie nodded. I completely understand. I've been feeling that way ever since I was dragged into a van and woke up here. They're talking about kidnapping more scientists. I'm terrified, but I have to do something to stop them. Izuku placed the flash drive in his pocket. I'll help you, I promise. Eddie patted his shoulder. You've been holding up amazingly well so far. Your parents must be proud of you. Now, put these on. He held up a stack of blood-stained bandages. Izuku said, his past trauma coming back. It's not real blood, Eddie said. We're faking an emergency. Move! He's in critical condition! Eddie screamed at the guards outside of the laboratory. Lying on a gurney, Izuku groaned in a hopefully convincing fashion. The guards exchanged glances. They spoke together in low voices. Izuku overheard one of them say, It's the special one. Rubbing under his glasses, Eddie sobbed, This is beyond what I can treat. I have special permission to take him outside. A guard said, We haven't been able to reach the Supreme Leader. Presumably because of the emergency Eddie had faked. Izuku hoped that lasted long enough. Eddie wailed, "He doesn't have time!" Izuku lay still and played dead. This finally seemed to work on the guards. They let Eddie pass. Unfortunately, the guards seemed to be following them. Hopefully Eddie had a plan to deal with that too. Izuku kept his eyes closed so he couldn't see where they were going. He heard the ding of an elevator door and felt it move down. The ground became rougher after they got off. When the gurney hit a lump, he uttered a fake moan. A phone rang. The guard said, "It's the Supreme Leader." Placing one hand over Izuku's eyes, Eddie pulled something from beneath his coat and threw it. The guards screamed. Izuku could see the blinding light even through Eddie's fingers. The time for faking was over. Izuku leapt up and ripped off the bandages. The guards were reeling and covering their eyes. A used flash bomb lay in the corner. Eddie helped Izuku down from the gurney. "Run!" They took off down the corridor, Izuku following Eddie. Behind him, he heard the guards getting to their feet. Luckily, none of them carried projectile weapons, just tasers. Eddie screeched to a halt before a keypad. He entered a password. "I've got a small, useless quirk. It lets me see which objects have been recently touched by a person. I can use it to figure out passwords." "That sounds plenty useful to me," Izuku said. The heavy metal garage door ground open, entirely too slowly. Izuku dropped to his knees, glimpsing a garage with half a dozen trucks inside. Without waiting for the door to finish opening, he squirmed under the crack. Eddie followed him. Standing up, Izuku asked, "How do we close the door?" "I need to enter the password again." Eddie went to the second keypad on the inside. His hands were shaking. Through the half-open door, Izuku saw the guards barreling towards them. He considered summoning one for all, but he still wasn't completely sure how, and with a broken bone he might become an obstacle to the escape. A ladder hung on the garage wall. Izuku took it down and threw it at the guards' feet. The first one tripped, crashing into the second one. The garage door started to move down. One guard got to his knees, crawling forward. Eddie warned, "The door won't close if anything is in the way." Izuku grabbed a broom off the wall. He bashed at the grasping hand, then shoved the whole broom out the door. The metal door slammed down. Eddie said, "I initiated lockdown mode. It will take a higher level password than they have to open the door. I also faked a gas explosion to get everyone out of the garage. Several more small explosions should have gone off around the compound. I'd hoped to keep Flecht distracted longer than this." Eddie jittered from foot to foot. Izuku said, "You've done plenty. Thank you." Clearly, this had been a long time in the planning. "Which vehicle are we taking?" Eddie pulled out a key. "I stole this off a man who carried equipment into the lab. I think the last vehicle to arrive was..." He looked around, then pointed at a smaller red truck. "That one." Eddie tossed Izuku the keys. "You start the motor while I open the garage door to the outside." Shards flew across the garage. A giant with dark red skin and two horns like the mythological Oni ripped the remaining metal aside. Flecked turned and two identical twins with indigo hair stood behind him. Izuku had seconds to make a decision. Fight or flight. He only had one shot with One for All before it broke a bone. He had a mixed success record activating his new quirk, and Flecht would turn back any blow. All last night, Izuku had tried to think up a way to counter-reflect, but he'd yet to come up with a usable idea. Flight it was. The door to the outside was only starting to open. In case they failed, Izuku hid the flash drive with information on Humarise's plans under the driver's seat. Maybe it would be found by Humarise, maybe no one would ever find it at all, but it was worth a shot. Next, Izuku jammed the key into the socket. He had no idea how to drive, but he was damn well prepared to try. He slammed his foot down on one pedal, and when that did nothing, the other. The truck rumbled, but didn't move. It must be in park. Inko didn't own a car, so Izuku only knew what he'd seen in movies. The truck had a stick shift. Oh dear, he had no idea what to do at all with one of those. Eddie ran up, hair disheveled and panting. Izuku immediately hopped over to the passenger seat. Eddie shot the car toward the opening door to the outside. The car stopped. Looking over his shoulder, Izuku saw the Oni-like man had grabbed the bumper. Eddie whimpered a prayer. Izuku suspected that it was all over, but he'd still try to the bitter end. "Come on, let's run!" He leapt out of the truck, sprinting for the glimmer of sunlight through the open door. He got maybe 3 steps before the twins grabbed his arms. They threw him at their leader. Flecht swept him into an aggressive hug. "Are you hurt? There's a bloody bandage on your back. Eddie's soul, your children will pay for this." "It's fake blood!" Izuku screamed. "I'm fine! Leave him alone!" He squirmed, careful not to hit Flecht in a way that would be reflected back at him. But he couldn't get free. The Oni dragged Eddie forward. Still gripping Izuku possessively, Flecht said, "Dr. Soul, your sins have been your undoing. If you hadn't placed your filthy hands on our Messiah, then your plan might have succeeded. But we had a faithful with the ability to track people place a tag on him so we would never lose him. That's how we found you so quickly." Guilt stabbed Izuku. He knew it was irrational, he couldn't have known, and he wasn't responsible for the cult's actions. But he couldn't help thinking, Eddie's carefully planned escape failed because of me. His children will be in danger because of me. Flecht purred. "Do you know why you were the perfect target for us, Doctor? Because with 3 children, we still have hostages if we kill one." Tears streamed down Eddie's cheeks as he begged incoherently. Izuku snarled, "Don't lay a finger on them, or I'll—" He hesitated. He was more than willing to take himself hostage by threatening self-harm, but that was a risky game. The cult had multiple people they could take hostage in return, and he only had himself. Injuries or starvation would make it harder to escape. "I'll never purify you again." Not that he'd ever been given a choice, but it was worth a try before he escalated further. Flecht caressed his face. "Just being in your presence purifies me, but I will bow to the will of the Messiah. I've already sent the faithful to bring the oldest boy here. I won't kill him, not yet, but his presence will be useful in ensuring the doctor's cooperation. And we might need a test subject for our cure. Wouldn't it be fitting to use this sinner's son rather than one of our own?" Eddie whimpered. Flecht ran his hands down Izuku's body reverently. "The door is open. The filthy outside air has reached you. You will need to be purified. And you promised to cooperate, didn't you?" Izuku didn't like the sound of that, but he nodded. Flecht said, "Take the Messiah to the room of enlightenment." End of Chapter 5. Omake time. Omake. At 2, Brutus? All for one. Whose side are you on, Judas? Aizawa. I'm on the side of Snark, and that's currently All Might. Omake. The airplane gets destroyed. All for one. Reminiscing about Nana Shimura's death reminds me of how Humarise helped me track down and kill her husband. Later, they also fed me information on where to find her before our final fight. They hated her almost as much as I did for corrupting one of their chosen ones. They blamed her for All Might developing a quirk, even though they didn't have the slightest idea about One for All. I suppose a stopped clock can be right twice a day. This means her death is ultimately all your fault, All Might. Aizawa. Go ahead and kill him, All Might. I'm not going to stop you this time. Omake. If the cult knew that All for One created One for All. Flecht turn. You're the reason one of our precious chosen ones got infected with a quirk? We might yet be able to save him with enough purification rituals. We'll capture All Might, then I demand you remove the quirk at once. All for One. We're weirdly on the same wavelength here. Flecht turn. Then we will kill you and use your ashes in the purification ritual. All for One. Just like that, it's gone. Omake, breaking the fourth wall. Author. Rhodey, my favorite World Heroes mission character. I found a way to add you to my story. Rhodey, as a test subject / hostage. Author, do you want to be in this story or not? Rhodey, I don't. Author, la la la, I can't hear you. I only hurt the characters I love. And all for one. Podfic's note. Thank you for your patience with this chapter. I ended up having to travel for a family funeral, and I had some of the audio recorded ahead of time, and I was planning to edit it while I was away, and it turned out that a good chunk of it got corrupted. So if you hear odd changes, I tried to match it as much as possible for the parts that I had to re-record when I got home, but if you notice any odd jumps or cuts or parts where it sounds different, that's why. I'll leave in some of my original Podfic's notes that talks about my immediate reactions, and you'll hear the corruption that happened to that. Funnily enough, I was actually editing the section where Aizawa, All For One, and All Might are on the airplane while I was in an airplane, so that was a fun coincidence. So we get into some more of the plot here. I love the mental image of our highly reluctant romance team here of Aizawa, All For One, and All Might, just like in economy class together, which is what's implied here, saying that they're all in a row. I would have thought that All Might or All For One for sure would have sprung for like business or even first class. First of all, to keep All For One away from civilians, but also just like the image of them all crammed into economy class, it's just so good. I also haven't seen this movie yet, so if the voices, especially for Eddie Soul, I'm assuming he shows up in the movie, if the voice for that is way off base, sorry. Also, is this fic tempting anybody else to learn how to drive stick shift just in case? If you've enjoyed this podfic, please take this time to let me know, and if you're enjoying the story, to let the original author know. Thanks for joining.